My name is Ruth Harper. I'm 76 years old. For most of my life, I taught English at Lincoln High School. I raised 2 children, buried 1 husband, and prided myself on living simply and honestly. Then, one winter morning, I opened my kitchen cabinet and realized my life no longer belonged to me. It belonged to pill bottles. Pink ones, blue ones, yellow ones. Bottles with names I couldn't pronounce. Bottles for the side effects of other bottles. My shoebox of medicine was heavier than my purse. Every month the prices crept higher. Every month my insurance covered less. I didn't notice when it began, just one more prescription, just one more copay. But by the time I was 76, the shoebox was full and my bank account was empty. I told myself this was just what aging looked like. Everyone I knew was on some cocktail of pills. We compared dosages like we used to compare recipes. We joked about needing a pharmacist instead of a doctor. But late at night, when the TV was off and the house was quiet, I felt a sick little tremor of fear. What if I'm not sick? What if I'm just trapped? The letter arrived on a Thursday. White envelope, insurance logo. I opened it at the kitchen table. This medication is no longer covered under your plan, it said. My blood pressure pill. The one thing standing between me and another stroke. The out-of-pocket price, $600. I called the insurance company. I waited on hold for 38 minutes. When a rep finally came on the line, she spoke in a chirpy voice about policy changes and formulary updates. I hung up without finishing the call. My hands were shaking. That night I lined up all my bottles and stared at them like suspects in a crime. They stared back, silent. The next morning, my neighbor Gloria's daughter phoned. Gloria had collapsed in her bathroom. The doctors said it might be a drug interaction. Gloria had been on even more medications than I was. She used to joke about it. Now she was lying in a hospital bed. Something hardened inside me. The fear that had been gnawing at me turned into anger. Under the anger, a strange, sharp resolve. I remembered my father after his stroke, how he had fought to walk again, one stubborn step at a time. I remembered a nurse whispering to me decades ago, "Don't let fear write the end of your story." Those words came back now, echoing in my kitchen. I gathered every bill, every receipt, every information sheet from every bottle and spread them across the table. The paper rustled like wings. I didn't yet know how I would fight, but I knew I would. This wasn't polite frustration anymore. This was my vengeance, not against a single doctor or pharmacist, but against a faceless system that had quietly drained me of money, health, and hope. Outside, snow was falling softly, covering the street in white. Inside, something else was starting to fall away, my obedience, my silence, my blind trust. I poured myself a cup of tea and whispered aloud, "Enough." The next morning I woke up before dawn. The kitchen still looked like a war room, papers and pill bottles spread across the table like evidence. For once, the sight didn't make me feel helpless. It made me feel focused. I started with a list. Every drug, every dosage, every monthly cost. I wrote them in my teacher's handwriting, neat columns, no abbreviations. Next to each one I left a blank space for notes. Then I called my daughter, Maria, and told her, "I need a new doctor. Someone who will look at the whole picture." She sent me the number of a community health clinic she'd heard about from a friend. Walking into that clinic felt like stepping into a different world. The waiting room was small but bright, with sunlight streaming through tall windows. No wall-sized ads for the newest miracle drug. Just a bulletin board with flyers about nutrition classes and legal aid for seniors. A young doctor named Dr. Alvarez came out to greet me himself. He shook my hand and said, "Let's go over everything." For the first time in years, someone listened. I pulled out my list and slid it across the desk. He read it slowly, frowning, occasionally whistling under his breath. "We can definitely simplify this," he said at last. "A lot of these overlap. Some might even be causing the symptoms they're supposed to treat. Over the next hour, he explained things no one had bothered to explain before: how drug companies set pricing tiers, how generics work, how to apply for patient assistance programs. He circled 3 of my medications and said, "These you truly need. The others will taper off carefully." Leaving the clinic that day, my shoebox of pill bottles felt lighter. Not because the bottles had vanished, not yet, but because for the first time in years, I had a plan. I started attending a free workshop at the clinic about seniors' health rights. I kept a journal of every symptom and every interaction with my insurance company. I called my pharmacy to ask about lower-cost generics. Some clerks were rude, but a few were helpful, even slipping me information I wouldn't have found on my own. Each call, each note, each small victory was like chiseling a brick out of the wall around me. One evening, while filing my paperwork, I realized I was sitting taller. My hands weren't shaking. The pills were still there, but the shame was gone. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a student again, learning a new subject. And this time, I planned to ace the test. By spring, my kitchen no longer looked like a pharmacy. 3 bottles stood neatly by the kettle: blood pressure, thyroid, vitamin D. The shoebox was gone. My journal was full of notes and contacts, patient assistance hotlines, generic drug charts, insurance appeal forms. Every page felt like a small victory. But it wasn't enough just to fix my own life. Once you see the machine, you can't unsee it. Everywhere I went, to church, the grocery store, the library, I noticed the same weary look on other seniors' faces when the subject of prescriptions came up. Quiet embarrassment. Quiet despair. I started to talk, gently at first, about what I had learned. Ask about generics, I'd tell them. Check the dosage. Get a second opinion. Their eyes would widen, as if I were giving away a secret map. Then one Sunday, Pastor Lee asked if I'd share my experience at the church seniors' lunch. My heart thudded, but I said yes. I stood at the front of the fellowship hall holding one of my old insurance statements, the big red "denied" stamped across it like a warning. "This used to terrify me," I said. "But you can fight it. You can win." When I finished, a small crowd gathered around me with their own stories, bills they didn't understand, medications they suspected were unnecessary, appeals they'd lost. That was the day my private vengeance turned into a mission. I joined a local advocacy group for fair drug pricing. We met in a borrowed library room once a week, 10 seniors with stacks of paperwork and a lot of indignation. We wrote letters to our representatives. We shared resources. We helped each other file complaints and appeals. We weren't shouting in the streets, but we were loud enough to be heard. I became the one who brought coffee and highlighters, who explained insurance jargon in plain English. In my teaching days, I'd loved seeing the light go on in a student's eyes when a lesson clicked. Now I saw that same light in my peers when they realized they weren't powerless. Each small victory added up. Gloria came home from the hospital and, with her doctor's help, cut her medications in half. Mr. Hayes from down the block appealed his insurance denial and won. People who had been stooped under the weight of pill bottles started standing a little taller. I still felt anger at the faceless system, how it had drained so much from me before I woke up. But the anger no longer burned me from the inside. It pushed me forward. It gave me purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was fighting back and helping others fight too. Summer arrived with a heat that shimmered off the sidewalks, but inside me there was a strange cool calm. My pill bottles sat quietly on the counter, a modest trio. The rest of the kitchen table was covered not with bills or bottles, but with pamphlets, handouts, and names, people to call, people to help. The war room had become a workshop. I'd started a small group called the Wise Patient Circle. At first it was just a few friends in my living room. Now, every Thursday afternoon, a dozen seniors filled the folding chairs in the church basement. We traded stories, shared discount programs, rehearsed what to say on insurance calls. We laughed, sometimes even sang hymns. More than once someone whispered, "I thought I was the only one." That was how I had felt once too. One hot evening after a meeting, I walked home with Gloria. She had color in her cheeks again, a spring in her step I hadn't seen in years. "You're not just helping people, Ruth," she said. "You're scaring the right people too." We both laughed at that, a tired, knowing laugh. That night, alone in my kitchen, I sat with a cup of tea and looked at the single insurance letter pinned to my fridge. It wasn't a denial this time. It was an approval, a refund for an overcharge I'd contested months before. The check had already cleared. I smiled, but the smile wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that I had learned to fight and win. I opened my journal to the first page where, months earlier, I had written in shaky letters, "Don't let fear write the end of your story." Below it, in my steadier handwriting now, I added, "And don't let silence write it either." Because that was the real lesson. It wasn't only about pills or pricing or policies. It was about dignity. About refusing to be reduced to a case number or a statistic. About remembering that even in the face of a billion-dollar machine, one stubborn, determined voice can still matter. If you're reading this, maybe you're where I was, staring at a stack of bills, wondering how it came to this. Maybe you've lost someone to a bad interaction or a denied claim. Maybe you're angry. Good. Anger can be a compass if you let it. Start with one question. One call. One list. Then another. Keep going. Don't let fear or silence write the end of your story either. Outside my window, the street lights flickered on. Somewhere down the block a child laughed. The world kept turning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt not like a victim of the system, but like a teacher again, passing on what I had learned, making sure no one else had to walk blind into the same trap. I lifted my tea, a quiet toast to freedom, and whispered, "Enough. And never again."